Hello, algebra students. Mr. Lawrence here, and we are going to learn a third way to solve a quadratic. And this one is kind of brilliant. I don't think I'd ever would have come up with it on my own. Whoever did was pretty sharp. Don't pat on my head because you'll prick your finger. Anyway, we already know how to solve a quadratic by factoring, right? And we also know how to do it by using the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The third way is going to be called completing the square. Now before I actually teach you the method, I've got 4 sample problems, A, B, C, and D. The whole key is we want our trinomial to be a perfect square trinomial. Okay, and we want A to be 1. So let's take a look at problem A here. Okay, A is 1, right? It's 1x squared. I've got plus 8x, and I've got this plus blank. Well, I need to know what number do I put there so that this will be a perfect square trinomial. It's really easy to find. I'm going to take half of B, 1/2 of B, and then I'm going to square it. So what's half of 8? Well, it's 4. And 4 squared is 16. And now x squared plus 8x plus 16 is a perfect square trinomial. Yeah. You try it on B. Take half of B. You got to make sure A is 1. Okay, A is 1. Yep, sure is. Take half of this and square it. Hopefully you got 25. All right, go ahead and do C on your own. See if you can do C. Here comes my answer. Yep, I got 4. Half of negative 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4 because it means this, right? Okay. How about D? What are you going to do in D? Well, you know, some of you get so freaked out about fractions you want to run to decimals. I think you're foolish. I think you're foolish. Watch this. Negative 5 halves. There we go. I just took half of 5 right there. That's what that says. Half of 5. Okay? And now I'm going to square it. Well, what's negative 5 times negative 5? Well, it's 25. And what's 2 times 2? Well, that's 4. And there you go. And it'll factor really easily. In fact, if you make note of this number here or this number here, it will be very useful to you when you actually go to do this. Okay, so normally to solve a quadratic we want it to equal 0. For completing the square, that's not the case. For completing the square, we don't want the C term where it's at. We're going to get rid of it. It's the first thing I'm going to do. Well, of course, my first thing really should be to make sure that A is 1, but I've set A up to be 1 on all of these problems. But A must be 1. Did you write that down? A must be 1. And I'm going to put plus a blank here, and that's going to equal negative 7 plus a blank. Okay, because if I do it to one side, I got to do it to the other. All right, so now I'm going to take half of this, which is 4, squared is 16. But if I add 16 to the left-hand side, I better add 16 to the right-hand side. All right, now watch how simply this is going to factor. X plus 4, quantity squared. Don't write it as 2 separate quantities. You'll see why in a minute. All right, and that's going to equal 9, right? Now, I want to be able to get rid of that square on that quantity. If I didn't have that square there, I could go ahead and use some algebra skills and it would be easy to solve, right? Well, how do you undo a square? The inverse of an exponent or a power is the root. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. But when I do it over here, I got to do plus or minus. All right, I got to do plus or minus because I'm undoing a square. Okay, so that will give me x plus 4, and that's going to equal plus or minus 3. X is almost alone. I'll subtract 4 from both sides. And so now I have x equal to negative 4 plus 3, which of course is negative 1. That's one of my solutions. Or x is equal to negative 4 minus 3, which is negative 7. So my two solutions are negative 1, negative 7. All right? Okay, let me do problem number 2 here. It's done pretty much the same exact way. I'm just erasing my other work to get it out of my way. Okay. Problem number 2. A is 1, so that's a good thing. I'm going to take half of this, which is -3, just writing it off to the side. Okay. I first really want to get rid of the 13, so I'm going to add 13 to both sides. And then I'm going to end up with x squared minus 6x plus a blank. That's going to equal 13 plus a blank. -3 was half of -6. Squared is 9. Look at that, a perfect square trinomial. Plus 9. Yeah, that's right. Thought I made a silly mistake, but I'm good. Now I'm going to factor this left-hand side. Since it's a perfect square trinomial, it's just going to factor like this. See that -3 ends up right there. Not a coinky-dink. All right, I want to get rid of the square, so I'll take the square root. And a lot of you are putting that 2 in there. That's fine. Okay, and it's plus or minus. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I have x minus 3, and that's equal to plus or minus the square root of 22. Now I can't simplify the square root of 22, it's not a perfect square, so I'm just going to get x alone, and I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And so my two solutions will be x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 22. And there you go. So we've got 3 plus the square root of 22 and 3 minus the square root of 22. And those will be the two solutions. Why don't you try problems 3, 4, and 5 on your own. Pause the video and see what you can do with them, and then I will demonstrate, just trying to give myself more room to work, how to do them, okay? Alright, hopefully you've tried them on your own. A is 1. I'm going to add 5 to both sides, and so I will end up with x squared plus 10x plus blank, and that's going to equal 5 plus blank. Alright. Half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25. I'll add 25 to both sides. So I will factor the left-hand side because now it is a perfect square trinomial. And that'll equal 30. I'll take the square root of each side. Remember, on the right-hand side it'll be plus or minus. And on the left-hand side it'll be x plus 5, and that'll equal plus or minus square root of 30. I don't see any perfect square factors at 30, so I can't break that down anymore. Excuse me. I'll subtract 5 from both sides, and I'll end up with the solution x equals -5 plus or minus the square root of 30. These are called the exact solutions because the square root of 30 is an irrational number. It's a decimal that goes on forever without repeating, right? We learned that way back in August. Well, so this is the exact answer. Now, sometimes in your homework or in Math Excel or something, they'll ask you for the decimal. Well, then you'll just type in -5 plus the square root of 30. Get that decimal, round it appropriately, and then do the same for -5 minus the square root of 30. Okay, problem 4. A is 1. C is already gone, so I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to need half of 7. Well, that's going to be 7 halves. Okay, so I'm going to have x squared plus 7x plus that blank, and that's going to equal 5 plus the blank. Now I have to take that 7 halves and square it, which will be 49 fourths. 49 fourths. Now please do not go and hide under the covers. This is easy. Perfect square trinomial, right? Factor it. Going to get x. B is positive, so it's going to be a positive 7 halves. Quantity squared. There you go. You just factored it. Piece of cake. This one here, I'm going to rewrite. So that's not a 5. I'm going to rewrite them so they're like terms. I'm going to call it 20 fourths. And then I'm going to combine like terms, and so I'm going to have 69 fourths. Okay? Now watch this. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Okay? What you may not realize, that is the same as taking the square root of 69 and the square root of 4. Okay, so left-hand side, I'm going to get x plus 7/2, and that's going to equal plus or minus the square root of 69, which is not a perfect square, over 2, because the square root of 4 is. Now I'm going to subtract 7/2 from both sides, and since my two fractions have the same denominator, they're like terms in other words, I'm going to write my solution this way. -7 plus or minus the square root of 69 over 2. And there's my exact answer. Again, if Excel wants a decimal, I'll do that. I'll give it the decimal. Just make sure if you type it on a calculator that this is in parentheses. -7 plus square root of 69 in parentheses, then divide by 2. Or -7 minus square root of 69 in parentheses, and then divide by 2. Otherwise, you'll be dividing the square root of 69 by 2 and then including a -7 with it, and it won't be the right answer. Okay, last one, and then we'll wrap up this video. Number 5. Hopefully you've already given it a real try. Oh, it's supposed to equal 0. Sorry about that. If it didn't equal 0, it wouldn't matter. Here, let's not make it equal 0. You probably couldn't have done it because of my goofy mistake. I'm so sorry. Oh dear. Let's make it equal, I don't know, 5. Okay. So you're going to add 1 to, well, if you want to pause the video and go ahead and try it now that it equals something, you go right ahead. All right, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And I'm going to end up with x squared plus 3x plus blank. That's going to equal 6 plus blank. All right, I'll take half of 3. 3/2, that's all it is. Square it, I'll get 9/4. This will be 9/4. Okay, I don't want this to be 6. I want it to be a different form of 6. 24/4, I believe, is the same as 6. Right? Now they're like terms. Okay, gonna factor is x plus 3/2, quantity squared. That's going to equal 33/4. I will take the square root of both sides, and the left-hand side will get me x plus 3/2. That's going to equal plus or minus the square root of 33 over 2. All right, I'm going to subtract 3/2. And my final solutions will be x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 33, all divided by 2. And there you go. That's completing the square, ladies and gentlemen. Piece of cake. That's it for the video. Mr. Lawrence signing off. Have a good night, everybody.